you writing all of this right now. I'll talk through it. So here's my style sheet. And I think probably that image isn't there. Yeah, the image isn't there. So I'll just copy that over real quick. There you go. I have splode.jpg and michael.ping. Okay, got my nice background. I got a nice teal glow over there. Let's add Michael to the page. So right under the H1, I'm going to put a div that I'm going to give a class of banner. And in there, I'm going to put an image. Source, michael.ping. Alt equals blank. You know the alt attribute on an image? Anybody know what that is? It's alternative text in the event that that image can't display, either because it didn't download it or hasn't downloaded yet, or because you're using assistive technology like a screen reader. So if that image actually contains some information that it's important for the user to receive, you don't want to rely on a picture alone to deliver that information. The easiest way to deal with that is to give it some alt text. For example, it's a very bad idea to do text as an image in the first place, but if you do, at least put that text in the alt attribute as well, so that it will be there for folks who can't get the image for whatever reason. In this case, it already says Michael Baywatch right next to it, so it doesn't really matter whether they see the image. So I'm just going to put alt equals blank so that nothing is there. That'll be fine. You know what I think I just did? I can't even find this thing. I did do that thing. So that's a pretty dang big image, as it turns out. I'm not even seeing it for whatever reason. Am I getting a 404? No, it's there somewhere. Oh, I haven't saved. That'll do it. Oh, no, yeah, I already did my CSS. All right, so let's talk about it. So it put a background on the HTML itself. So the background property in CSS is a shorthand property for setting most of the other background properties in one line. So background-image would be this, splode.jpg. No repeat, that would be background repeat. We don't want it to tile. Center, that would be the background position. And fixed tells it it should not scroll. So if I add a bunch of stuff here, and I scroll, the image stays in place.
Okay, that center thing, is that like X, Y?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah. Background size cover. This is a fairly new CSS 3 feature. And that is what makes it fill the whole thing, no matter the dimensions. No matter what I do, if it's wider than it is tall, taller than it is wide, whatever, it always does a sensible thing with the size.
Question, does it get blurry if the picture's small?
If what?
If the picture, like, the quality is small or low, if you do it cover, will it be...
Oh, sure, yeah, it'll look bad, right. Yeah, so it's a pretty high-res image. So like I said, background size is newer. If you're ever worried about the support for a particular CSS feature, there's a really nice website, caniuse.com. Can I use background size? Okay. The newer properties to affect background images, including size and stuff, yeah, it looks like it works everywhere, including IE 11. So in the US, yeah, 97.53, yeah, 98, over 98%. I'm willing to accept that. It's not that big a deal if the background image looks a little different for less than 2% of people. And it also tells you things about known issues and workarounds for stuff when there's buggy behavior there. Even better, if you did install some of the Visual Studio Code extensions that are on the tools page on the website, that included a Can I Use extension. If I hover over this, look, it not only tells me what it does, specifies the size of the background image, it tells me Edge, Firefox, Safari 4.1. It shows me the lowest version number of each browser that supported it, all the way back to IE9. Cool. Super, super handy. Can I use? All right, so then the body, Foundation gives the body a background color of white, I think. So we just changed that to transparent. Added a little bit of padding to the top of it so that Michael's hair wasn't right up against the top of the window or the viewport. Now my H1, I floated it to the right. If I took that out, here's what it would look like. Boo. So we won't get real deep into floats here, but float right takes care of this issue for me. Gave it a little bit of margin top, and it's actually that margin top that I'm using to make his hands line up perfectly with the border of the input. And as you might imagine, figuring out exactly what that needed to be, a little bit of a pain in the neck. So when you inspect something in the developer tools, you also see all the CSS that applies to that thing over here, and you can edit it in place. So like I can, instead of change the style sheet, refresh, change the style sheet, refresh, I can just fiddle with it in here until I get it just right. So that's pretty nice. You can turn rules on and off. Font family bungee we talked about. And then text shadow. Yeah.
So when you change it in the browser, is that just to make sure you get the numbers right and then you have to go change it?
Correct. It's not going to be a permanent change. Right. And as soon as you refresh the page, you lose it. Yep. So text shadow is not as complicated as it looks there. Let's look it up. Text shadow. I want to look it up, if for no other reason than I want to tell you about CSStricks.com, which is a fantastic resource. In addition to a lot of blog posts that are just really, really good, it has a CSS almanac of every single property in CSS. And their examples and explanations, I think, are better than just about anyone's. So in this case, text shadow. Okay, there's an example. And you can have more than one shadow on the same thing by separating with a comma. You don't have to put each one on a new line, but it's easier to read that way. So the first two values specify the length of the shadow offset. So like if you put 0, 0, it's going to be immediately behind the text. The first one is the X coordinate, so it'll shift it to the right or left relative to the text. The next one, up or down. Then the blur radius. This has a 5-pixel blur here. And then the color. So all my shadows here are directly behind it. They're not offset. But then I have one that's this blurry, this blurry, this blurry. So I have 3 layers of a white shadow, and then 3 of a light teal, and then a darker teal. Michael Bay would be proud. There we go. So again, my small, I made it a different color from the rest of this, right? And smaller font size, and I don't want the crazy shadow behind the Michael part. Banner, position absolute. So the banner, recall, is the thing that contains the image. Let's see what happens if I turn off position absolute on the banner. all kinds of bad stuff. So here's one thing that happens. Now, the text box is right after his finger's end. So by positioning it, also, it makes sure that it's not overlapping this either. Positioning takes the thing out of the flow of the document. In other words, other things will not try to make room for it. It'll just float exactly where you put it. So by not specifying a left or top offset on this thing, that just means it'll appear where it would have appeared anyway, except relative to its container. But it'll be out of the document flow. So it's not going to keep other things from rendering in that place, and other things aren't going to stop it from rendering where it wants to. So I could have also put a top value like top 30 pixels. And I could have positioned it that way instead of the way I did. CSS positioning should kind of be a last resort if you're actually trying to figure out where it's going to go on the page, because it does break the flow. So then the image, I set it to 100 pixel height because it's actually an enormous image. In fact, if I were going to use this for real, I would probably run this through Ping Crush or something because it's over a meg. But I finished it at about 850 this morning, so. Ooh, yeah. List container. I forgot I added some style sheets to this thing in the middle of class. So forget about that. That was never there. It's still there? Oh, yeah, I guess we did this right off the bat. Right now, or before I pasted in the style sheet. Oh no, it's still impossible to read, right? That black on fire is not so good. So I wanted to add a div around the list. Well, actually, there's already a div there, right? This one. So I could just give it a class of, what did I say? List container. And then I had a rule there that gave my list container a white smoke background.
So just adding list container to the class gives it that?
Only because I wrote this rule ahead of time, yeah. Yeah. The flick list, I set the margin bottom to 0 because there was some margin built in by Foundation. This is a newer version of this darn style sheet. I did not paste in the right thing. Okay, this is how much I wanted to show you. The stuff that we had already talked about. The rest of it will come. Okay. Blah 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 blah. Yeah. So still unreadable. Sorry. We'll worry about the other when we get to it because we're not worrying about that quite yet. But we can go ahead and put in our little rule there for list container since we talked about it. Dot list container. Background color. White smoke. That is better. I didn't save it. Yeah, okay. Very good. Cool. Add appropriate theming. Push. Okay, now we're caught up aesthetically